Hello, everyone, and welcome to the At Matters podcast, hosted by the Outer Loop Theater Experience, where we create art that matters. I am Rachel Yoder, and here on the At Matters podcast, we just like to create a space to explore the question, what are we here to do, through the lens of art for social change. And today with me, I have a very exciting guest who is here with me today.
Hi, I am Terilyn Eisenhower.
Amazing. And we are thrilled to have Terilyn on today. Can't wait to jump into this conversation. We also, in their little producing seats, as usual, we have Michael and Melissa. They are here as well.
Hello.
Great. Thanks, guys. Hello. Good to hear from you. But before we jump into the episode where we're going to hear all about Terilyn's life and purpose in artistry, we have to start with our favorite game, which is 5 things. So we've briefed you on this game a little bit, but just for any of our listeners who haven't listened to the podcast before, I'm going to throw Terilyn a category, and then she's going to have to give me the first 5 things that come to mind, no thinking aloud, and then we're going to reverse. She will throw me a category, and I will have to give the first 5 things. Are you ready for it?
I'm so ready.
Amazing. Okay, Terilyn, 5 things that you love about living in Chicago.
Oh my God, I could do 50. The first is Lake Michigan. I've always lived walking distance to Lake Michigan when I've been in Chicago. That I think is the best perk of living in this city by far. The second is just like my Edgewater neighborhood. I've been here for a few years and I love the balance between being like 20 minutes from downtown, but then also having like a real neighborhood vibe, and there's families and, tree-lined streets, and it feels very safe and homey. And having that balance of like big city and small town in one little neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
It's affordable. I think it's amazing to live here and like be able to like afford a life where you can be relaxed and at ease. And, I know you used to live in New York as well. It's a stark difference from New York there. I love the people. I think that Chicagoans are just the nicest, kindest, warmest people. So I love that. And then the summer, like everybody just comes out and we're all out of hibernation. And like, there is this real like sense of like solidarity. And like, we just did that. And now we get summer.
Yes.
And like I feel like the first few warm days of the year, everybody is just like talking to each other on the street, and like beaming at the sun. So yeah, the summer in Chicago, it outweighs the winter a million times.
Amazing. Agree. I hesitated even giving you that category because I almost wanted to like gatekeep Chicago and like, no, don't tell anybody how great it is.
I know. As I was saying it, I was like, but also not too many people move here because this is our, like, we need to keep it a secret.
Amazing. Perfect. Do you have a category for me?
I do. So, I just finished taking a watercolor class for funsies recently. And so it got me thinking, like, if accessibility and finances were not an issue, like, what are 5 recreational classes that you would love to take if you had the time, money, accessibility, etc.?
Oh, that's so good. So many choices. Okay. The first thing that came to mind, since we removed the barriers of accessibility and time and all of those things, was something that I think I'd be so bad at, but like, I have always wanted to try like surfing.
Yeah.
I think that would be so fun. And like, I know that's like lives in the realm of like artistic expression, but it's just like, seems very physical and very like very fun. I used to dance, and it used to be like a big part of my life, but I haven't done it in years. I would love to get back to dance. That would be something that would be very joyful for me. I love that you've taken a watercolor class. I would love to do some kind of like a drawing class because I just enjoy the process of it, even though I'm not good at it. I just like how it feels to make something.
Mhm.
Pottery, I also feel the same way about. Like, I would love to like get my hands dirty and like mess around with what that feels like. Um, ooh, another one. Um, oh, I have always wanted to learn to play the drums because that is my
Me
favorite
too.
instrument. Yes, I love percussion. I love like
Yeah.
the rhythmic nature of it. So
Mhm.
that's high on the list as well.
Amazing.
Oh my goodness, that's such a good category. I feel like that was. Have you ever done the artist way?
Have it literally like on the desk in front of
Oh,
me right
same.
here.
I feel like that's like straight out of the artist way.
Yep,
I love that.
exactly. I recently abandoned the artist way again. I can only ever make it like a third or fourth of the way through, and someday I will finish all of it. But I feel like microdosing it does the same thing.
Yeah, no, it does. Every time I pick it up, I think I've done it twice now.
Mhm.
There's always something new in there, and it's almost like
Yes,
starting it over. Even if you look at it again, do the same thing, it's like, oh, but I'm different now, so this is different.
exactly.
Love it. Amazing. Well, that's a good segue into what we want to talk about today, which is just a little bit about your journey, your who you are as an artist, and how you've gotten to where you are now. So, before we dive into your story, just to give our listeners a little bit of context, can you just tell everybody how we kind of got introduced, how you came to be upon this podcast?
Yes. So a few months ago, a dear friend of mine, Zoe DePretta, who was in the band Mosey, was performing at Talk Hard, which is hosted by Outer Loop Theater, and and it was like the first Talk Hard in Chicago, right?
Yeah, it was
Um,
actually like our preview, like our soft launch.
right. The soft
Yeah.
launch. And so I get this text in the middle of the day being like, hey, my band is performing at this thing down the street from you tonight. Here's the flyer. Do you want to come? And I just kind of glanced at it and was like, absolutely, this seems amazing. And I went with very little context and found myself at this salon at the Raven Theater, which is a 10-minute walk from my home. And it was like, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but it was just such an incredible evening and so much fun and just full of these like diverse and inspiring performances. And at the end of Talk Hard, I believe Michael got up and said, if anybody else wants to perform something or bring something up, we have, a few slots for like last minute, just spontaneous performances. And I like was so inspired by everybody in the room, and I just whipped out my phone and like searched keywords in my email inbox to find a monologue that I had written a long time ago, and was brave enough and had like the encouragement of the room to get up and perform it. And then we stayed connected via email, and I just made it a point to keep in touch with you, keep in touch with Michael and Melissa, because I want to welcome you to Chicago, and I'm so inspired by the work that you do, and I'm excited that you hopefully will be doing stuff in my neighborhood. So yeah, so that brought me here.
Amazing. So it was so great that, first of all, that you felt inspired on that night to share your work. And it was just, we were so excited to be introduced to your work. What the piece that you shared, which preview for everyone listening, you're going to get to hear the piece that Terilyn shared at Talk Art at the end of this episode. So we're very much looking forward to that. But just your writing is so unique and it's so interesting and it's so the way that you performed the piece, the way that it comes through you is unique and special and sparkles in such a
Oh,
beautiful way that we were just so thrilled to stay connected and just really excited to get to talk to you. So thank you
thank you
for
so
sharing your
much.
work.
Oh my goodness, thank you.
No, it's I mean it's really special work.
Thank you.
So love to introduce our audience to you a little bit more as well. So if you could just tell us a little bit more about yourself as an artist. Is writing the primary art form that you identify with? Is it a little bit of everything? What's been kind of, were you kind of born knowing you were an artist, or has it been like a little bit of a more winding path to that? What's that been like for you?
Yeah. So for a long time, I considered myself just a theater artist. That would have been the label that I used. I grew up doing theater. I grew up doing musicals. From like literally preschool age, I was, like up on stage doing the 10-minute preschool performances, and that was just always part of my being, is to be a performer. And I got to college, and similar to you, I just listened to the episode where you talked about your story. So I feel like there's a lot of similarities in our journey.
Mm.
But I originally was going to get serious in college and like get an education degree. And I just couldn't stay away from the theater department.
Mhm.
And so in college, I was acting, I was directing, I was writing. I produced all of the student theater on campus. I was part of ensembles and trained with various theater companies, mostly in like devised work, ensemble driven work. And I graduated college with a full scholarship to the Strasberg Institute in New York,
Mm.
where I got
Mm.
a year-long certificate there. And
Nice.
so I was really doing the theater thing. And I didn't want to just act. I was doing all sorts of uh, playing all sorts of roles in the theater, and was really a theater artist. And then in the last several years, COVID obviously really upended everything.
Mm.
And I took a step away from the theater because Zoom theater just for me didn't feel sparkly. It didn't feel like something I wanted to participate in much. And
Mm.
so I shifted gears. I really focused on building a career, and I got into um very workaholic mode for a few years there.
Mm.
And now, kind of coming out of COVID and having burnt myself out in corporate America, I'm kind of finding who I am as an artist again.
Mm.
And I am having so much fun being flexible with what that is. And
Mm.
so, in a lot of ways, I still am called to the theater. But I also just love storytelling in general. I love writing. I've also always been a writer. And so, in junction with playwriting, I also write a lot of poetry.
Mm.
I had a COVID project with a collaborator of mine named Evangeline Stott, and she and I have this project called Foundling Daughters, where we write, I write poetry, and she creates collages that speak to each other on the topic of grief and losing our mothers at a very young age. So
Wow.
that is a major creative outlet for me. And
Mm.
then I've been taking classes. I've been taking watercolor classes, and I'm signed up for a drawing class soon. And, I don't expect to like make money or become a visual artist as a career or anything, but I have been loving, I took a jewelry making class, and just trying to live my life through the lens of creativity and through the lens of being a multidisciplinary artist.
Mm.
Um, and thinking about what does it mean to be an artist, even if you're not currently in a process that will result in a performance or a novel being written. Um, right now, I don't have anything that has a culmination at the
Mm.
end of it planned, but I'm trying to, yeah, just find what it means to be an artist regardless.
Hmm. That's really interesting. That that reframe. It sounds like did that kind of start happening for you around COVID? Was that kind of where that shift got made for like this? I have to look at this differently.
I think coming out of COVID, and having that life breathed back into our culture and our society, and I think a lot of it is in juncture with feeling like I have a stronger community now.
Mm.
We were so isolated for so long, and I threw myself into my work,
Mm.
and I felt fairly disconnected from my creativity for a while there.
Mm.
foundling daughters and writing that poetry was really my anchor to creativity through COVID. But
Hmm.
otherwise, I didn't feel super inspired. And something that we mentioned the artist way, something that I think a lot about is this idea of filling the well
Mm-hmm.
and finding like outlets to consume creative work in order to produce creative work.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found that the more that I take myself out on artist dates and go to events like Talk Hard and see music, and my friends and I throw our own salons monthly as well, the
Oh.
more that I am participating in my community's artistic endeavors, the more inspired I feel to create my own work. So that has really been blossoming in the last 2 years, kind of as our world is coming back together.
Yeah, that I feel that really resonates with me as well, and I do notice in myself. I feel like it's something that we don't always realize or we don't always think about, but I just caught myself recently, just feeling like, I'm feeling kind of down, I'm feeling kind of depressed, and then went to, intentionally took myself to see some
Yeah.
theater, and then it's like a medicine. It's very healing to
Mm-hmm.
take in a piece of art. You're like, "Oh god, I feel like a person again." Um,
Mm-hmm.
you talked a little bit about that corporate burnout. So what's been your experience dabbling in the corporate side of things, and like how have you navigated that balance as an artist?
Yeah. So, um, maybe I'll start with explaining what I do now and then how I got there.
Perfect.
So, for the last year, I have been operating my own coaching and consulting business. So, I am an HR and culture consultant for small companies. And then I am a career and empowerment coach for anybody, but I tend to work with artists and people with nonlinear, non-traditional paths.
Hmm.
And that has been the most incredible journey, being able to do work that I think is meaningful with the skill set that I gathered over the last 6 years or so, in more of a corporate setting. And basically, what I do, whether I'm working with like a company or with an individual, is I'm really just trying to get people to love their job.
Hmm.
And whether that's creating an environment and a culture that promotes, a positive employee experience, or working with an individual to like get them to find the right career path and the right job for them, so that that job can easily integrate into the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever end I'm attacking it on, I'm just trying to make people love their jobs. And so I got here from working in startups mostly. I had a huge stint randomly in the recreational fishing industry, which
As one
was,
does.
as one does, but I that was my intro into HR, and I really
Hmm.
was able to build a culture, a company culture. I was able to build an HR presence in this small startup and grew us from 30 people to about 115.
Wow.
And it was the most incredible ride of my life, and it also absolutely broke me.
Hmm.
And so uh, I had to swallow my own medicine and say, this is not a job that's serving you. This is not a job that you love. And so I went out and I did my own, I've been doing my own thing now for about a year.
Hmm. That's That's so interesting to hear. I think that story, I'm sure you're finding it in your consulting practice and your coaching practice, that probably a lot of mirroring of that story with a lot of people, because
Mm-hmm.
I've done some work in the HR space as well, and in the sort of corporate leadership
Yeah.
development space as well. And I think that there's this disconnect so often between like the human experience and being a human being, and how that kind of shows up for just like what life is and how messy it is and how emotional it is and how
Yeah.
complicated it is, and how that interacts with the corporate space, which is just very, a lot of times, anti-human being. It's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
sterilized, and so it does to use your words, I mean, that's very powerful verbiage to put to that. It broke me. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's very common, is that people feel broken by these systems that we put ourselves inside of. And so I always find it interesting, and I think it's pretty common when artists gravitate into that, consulting space, that coaching space. It's almost
Yeah,
like, how do we breathe humanity back into this structure and into this system? Um,
exactly.
what are some ways that you've been able to work with folks to to get that love to return a little bit to either their job or just how they see themselves in their job? What have you found there?
Yeah, I think something that is really important to me that I remind folks of is we are not two different people. We are
Mhm,
not Terilyn at work and Terilyn outside of work. Like, you are one human being, and you have a set of values and you have a set of skills, and they're we so often like put on our corporate hat and then take it off at the end of the day. And sometimes we need to do that to survive. Um, but my goal is to help people to live in integrity
mm,
and to feel like their job is part of this ecosystem that is their life,
mm,
and not a separate thing in the corner from 9 to 5 that, they flip on and off like a light switch.
mm,
And so helping people, especially artists as well, figure out like what skills do you have that you enjoy using, that you bring to the table, and how can that pair with the workplace?
mm,
How can you not shove yourself into a box, but be fully present in who you are and find the box that fits you?
hmm. And do you find that what barriers do you find that are in the way of people being able to show up as their authentic self, kind of both at home and at work?
I think a lot of times it's a scarcity mindset.
Hmm.
A lot of times sometimes it's very real, financial constraints or, logistical constraints of if they need certain benefits or if they need, a certain amount of money to live, they are scrambling to just get the next
Mm,
thing, just whoever will take me. And so that is a very real part of reality.
mhm,
But when we get to a place where we are privileged enough to perhaps take a step back and get a little bit more expansive in our thinking, and if we're able to um, form a partnership with a workplace versus just who will take me,
hmm,
um, if that makes sense.
mhm. Yeah, it really does. So, do you see, you've described such a vast artistic background, and then this also, this really interesting work in this other realm. Um, how does that sort of manifest for you, and when you think about, like, what is your purpose? When you call to the question of, like, what is my purpose on this planet? Do you see those as two kind of separate purposes, or do you see it all as kind of one purpose? How does that show up for you?
What's my life purpose? That's the
Yeah, what is
question.
your life purpose? Just
Yeah,
like
easy.
casually, if you could just in 5 minutes summarize that.
Yeah, it's chill. It's chill. I think I'm still figuring that out, Rachel.
Mhm.
But I do think all of it is part of one journey.
Mm,
When I look at the kind of work that I'm drawn to artistically and in the workplace, everything usually comes back to building a sense of community,
mm,
prioritizing empathy, and authenticity is
mm,
a big one for me.
mhm,
And I've always considered myself both a connector and like a cheerleader of other people. I love to be in that support role for somebody and help them realize their potential.
mm,
I love to be part of an ensemble and create work together. I think that art is just exponentially more interesting and more inspiring and a better experience when it's done in community.
mm,
Um, and so, yeah, those are things that I keep coming back to as empathy, authenticity, community, those tend to show up in pretty much everything I do.
Hmm. In reading a little bit about, your path from the internet, it seems like you've had an interesting path. Like it hasn't been, you know, very very linear, and it looks like you
No.
you know took some time off, living on the road for a little while. How did that all, especially as what you just spoke about, the importance of community to you, how did that journey kind of evolve, and how did you find community on the road? How have you built that life for yourself from your your varied experiences?
Yeah, I mean, my sense of community really began when I moved to Chicago, and that was
Mm,
about 7 years ago. But even before that, I have such a love-hate relationship with social media and with the
mm,
internet.
mhm,
But I think that it can be a really beautiful tool for staying connected with folks. And so, even moving from New York to Chicago in 2017, I felt like I was kind of bringing along a lot of connections and a lot of friends, just through the digital age.
mm,
And I started building this community here in Chicago. And then I left for about 11 months,
mm,
and was on the road. This was during COVID. It was a way to stay sane. I was working remotely during that time. And I wish I could say I did a really great job of keeping my community with me, and I didn't.
mm,
It was really isolating.
mm,
And I mean, I love to travel. I think that travel is just an integral part of my experience of growing up and who I am. I used to do a lot of international travel pre-COVID. I've been to 20 countries and now about 30 something states. Um,
nice.
and also, that was a time in my life where I was not super inspired. I was not
Mm,
super connected to my community. And then having come back the last 2 years where I've been able to set roots, it's just, I didn't lose any of that, the groundwork that I built before I was
mm,
traveling. And I think that that is also a beautiful part of the digital age, is that you can leave for a year and come back and people still know where you are and who you are. And you don't have to lose track of people, even with long hiatuses.
mm.
Um, but yeah, I wish I could say that I did a great job building community along the way, but it was during COVID. And so I was not, um, I was not building community,
Mm,
unfortunately.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. And then, do you feel like that sort of loss of that kind
Mhm.
of heightened the need for it upon your return?
Oh, I was so hungry for it when I got
Mhm.
back. So hungry for it and so ready to be in person with people. Um, I kept in touch with people via FaceTime, and I was on Google Meets for work all the time. I mean, I was seeing faces often, but
Mhm.
to be in the room with people is just so, so different. And I feel like we're finally coming back a little bit more fully. It feels like that kind of in-person community is flourishing more and more. And that is something that's so beautiful about theater. And to bring it back to something like Talk Hard,
Mm,
there is a magnetism between being in the same room with a performer and an audience, or a creator, the art and the viewer.
mhm.
That space in between, that physical space in between, I think is just so full of magic.
Hmm. Agreed. It is interesting how kind of long it's taken to get that feeling back, and I agree with
Yeah.
what you like, but it does feel like we're just starting, they're just
Hmm.
seeing more in-person things, and I've recently just myself been taking more in-person classes versus online classes, and that
Hmm.
feeling is so different, and that we so took it for granted before the pandemic, and then to
Yeah.
be separated from it for so long, and then now to be back in it is like, oh wow, yeah, no, we really need
Yeah.
this. Like, this is convenient and all this this Zoom thing, but
Yeah.
we'll keep the parts of it that work, and then we need to be back in the
Exactly.
space. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I do know that you have kind of a new creative project that that you're working on.
I do.
Do you want to tell us a little bit? That's a very in-person sort of experience. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yes. So I am 30 weeks pregnant right now.
Amazing.
I'm expecting my first child on November 11th. So 11/11, which feels very magical.
It does.
And yeah, I have been thinking about having a baby and raising a child and becoming a mother as a creative project. I've sort of branded it that way for
Hmm.
myself.
Hmm. That's I love that. That's such a beautiful way to look at it. How does that kind of yeah, how does that manifest? Like how does that mindset manifest as you go through the process of your pregnancy?
Yeah. So I'm thinking about it in three ways. So in one way, I am literally creating a human body right now.
Yeah.
Which
That's a
is
lot of
so
work.
weird. It's so crazy and it is a lot of work. But so there's this idea of creation and my body is creating a person. And you know, just that experience in and of itself and bearing witness to it
Hmm.
and contributing actively where I can, but also just kind of letting my body do its thing has been just such a beautiful and mind-blowing experience.
Hmm.
The second way I think about it is, like I said, art for me is very collaborative. And it's not like I'm going to receive a default baby from the baby store and get to like shape it the way that I want to. Like,
Hmm.
this is going to be a child with their own personality and preferences and like little things that make them tick. And, you know, we're dealing with a unique individual.
Hmm.
And so I get to respond to what is in front of me
Hmm.
and kind of co-create life alongside this baby, and then along with my fiance too.
Hmm.
He'll be an active part of that process and building a family together as well.
Hmm.
And so I think that um, again, that idea of like art needs to be in the context of who else is involved and the space that you're in and the limitations that are inherent in whatever situation you're in. Like, yeah, just this idea of co-creating this all together with the baby and with my partner. And then the third way I think about it is becoming a mother myself and what that creative process is
Hmm.
for me. And the author Glennon Doyle has this really beautiful quote in her book Untamed about how she thinks a mother should be a model, not a martyr.
Hmm.
And I'm taking that like very seriously in terms
Hmm.
of I want to look at my life as a work of art. I want to approach how I live my life as a creative endeavor so that I can model that for my child, and not just lay all of my passions aside to attend to, you know, their needs and their whims and their passions. I
Hmm.
want to be a role model and you know, continue to do the things that I love. And I know that that is going to have to change in the context of motherhood, but I'm
Hmm.
not willing to lose it. And
Hmm.
so become that process of becoming a mother feels like a creative endeavor as well.
Hmm. That's such a beautiful perspective on
Thank you.
motherhood and on the creative process and the creative act of giving life. That's just a really beautiful reflection that I think is I don't hear a lot of people describe it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, you spoke earlier about authenticity and that just feels very authentic to you. And like therefore it's just I feel like shining the most beautiful light on what you're about to do. And I just thank you for sharing that perspective because I find it really beautiful and inspiring.
Thank you.
Um, as we are I know we're kind of headed to towards the end of this episode, even though I feel like I could do a part 3 and a part 4 and I could continue the conversation for a long time because you just have so much beautiful wisdom to share. But I just want to touch on a little bit. You spoke about earlier that you've lost your own mother. As you
Yeah.
approach motherhood, how does that experience inform the process?
Yeah, I think so. The context with that is that I lost my mom when I was 17.
Hmm.
And so that was coming up on 14 years ago.
Hmm.
And that break of losing my mom right at that time, it was right before I went to college. My life feels very divided in chapters of like childhood with my mom and then adulthood without her,
Hmm.
just naturally with the timing of all of that. And so I have done so much work, so much processing through the loss of her, and a lot of that through my project Foundling Daughters, where Evangeline and I have created these kind of doorways into being able to talk about the person that you've lost in a
Hmm.
more intimate way, because we tend to avoid those conversations.
Hmm.
So through that work, I've written a lot of poetry and done a lot of just musing on, who my mother was, what it was to have her with me, what of hers am I still carrying on today? What dreams did I take on of hers? What should maybe I leave behind? The
Hmm.
creative process has actually really helped me. I don't want to say come to terms, because that's not what I mean, but it's helped me sit with the fact that I've lost my mom and she's not here on this planet, this plane with us, but her wisdom and what I've gained from the 17 years I did have with her is still very much with me.
Hmm.
And I've lived my whole adult life, in her absence. And while I would give anything to have her back, I'm also very used to her presence being a different kind of presence versus a physical one in the room with me. And
Hmm.
so I really take a lot of inspiration from how she approached life. She was also an artist. She was more of a visual artist, but I felt like I had the best childhood with her.
Hmm.
And so I want to take a lot of that and give it to my children. But yeah, she shows up in all sorts of ways. So it doesn't really feel like a lack to me. It feels just kind of like a different kind of presence.
Hmm. Thank you so much for sharing that with us and
Yeah.
with our listeners. We are in just a moment. Everyone is gonna get the gift of experiencing your work through your monologue as well. But just a reminder to all of our listeners that you can listen to new episodes every Thursday wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on all of our social media channels. And also, where can our listeners find you, more about your work? Where can they find all of the projects that you mentioned if they want to check that out?
Yes. So on Instagram, that's really the social media platform I'm most active on. You can find me at Terilyn with 3 underscores after it. So TERILYN underscore underscore underscore. If anybody can help me get just Terilyn without the underscores, I will be forever indebted. That's where we're at. You can also find me. My website is so close to being launched, so you will be able to find me at helloterilyn.com. If you go there and it doesn't look like there's a website there, like check back in a week, depending on when you're listening to this. And I'm also on LinkedIn if you want to be professional friends. I'm Terilyn Eisenhower on LinkedIn.
Amazing. What about Foundling Daughters? Where can people find more about that? Read that.
Foundling Daughters has an Instagram page as well. It is on a bit of a hiatus because Evangeline has wonderful other creative projects she's working on, and I am growing a baby. So it's a little quiet over there. But if you want to stay in touch with Foundling Daughters, it is just at Foundling Daughters on Instagram.
Amazing. And before we get into your monologue, do you have a call to action that you'd like to leave our audience with today?
I told you I would think of one based on what we talked about, and I did. So,
Amazing.
in terms of classes, I take a ballet class through the Parks Department of Chicago. I'm also signed up for a drawing class through the Parks Department of Chicago, and people sleep on the Parks Department. There are so many classes you can take, and most of them are like $20. So if you want art classes, there's theater classes, there's dance classes, there's like recreational sports, there's like swimming lessons. Like, go to the Parks Department website and find classes there because it's amazing.
Amazing. I will definitely be acting on that. Thank you so much for
Yes.
sharing that with all
I
of us.
need to remind people about it because nobody knows about it. And it's like just such a treasure trove.
It sounds like it. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Amazing. Okay, well, perfect. So in closing, we're gonna end on a little monologue. You can just go ahead and introduce the piece and then hop right to it.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to pull up my script here. So this is a monologue that I wrote from my play Love Locked. And I don't think it needs any other context. Hi, I'm Quiva, and I guess I'm an addict. Sorry, it's my first time. I don't really know what I'm supposed. Okay. So I've been kind of reckless. Wait, can I just talk about whatever I want? Because I'd really rather. Okay. Okay. Thanks. Sorry. So I think I'm a bit off my hinges, but I like to run across traffic like all the time, often. I just really like it. So whenever I need to cross the street, I don't look, I just go, just run. And it doesn't really matter if there's a crosswalk or cars coming. I just run really fast. And it's mostly for fun. It makes everything tingly and your heart pumps and pumps. A game. But I wonder sometimes what would happen if I lost the game? What if I got hit? And what if I died? And what if that would be okay? Like, what if tomorrow morning the newspaper tells the story of a Dublin girl struck dead by a van, like an inexplicable auto accident, and I was gone? Like, it'd be cool, right? I mean, like, clearly fucked up, but I think it'd be an interesting story. A nice dramatic way to go. I don't know. I don't want to die. I want to stress that. I'm not suicidal, promise. But sometimes I think it's more fun to actively escape death than to avoid it. I don't know. I don't know if that makes any sense. I often think about the first time I ran across the street like that. It was a few years ago with my first boyfriend, and the air was just really raw. December air. It was late and we were all bundled up, just walking around. Like, we weren't even going anywhere. And we came to this crosswalk and I didn't even look. I didn't think. I just let go of his hand and I ran. And I was nearly across. And there was this huge rush of air behind me. And it was a car. Black car on a dark street in that stupid city without streetlights. And there was no stop sign and its headlights were on. It was fully my fault. And I should have cried. I think about that, how I should have been distressed. But I laughed because I was on the other side of the street. And that's when I realized I could die if I want to, but only then. And my boyfriend, he was just furious with me. He was yelling from across the street, like, what is wrong with you? Like, Quiva, are you crazy? And I remember thinking, well, shit, I think I am. Thank you.